Well, I promised you all that I would be here at 4 o'clock. I guess it's just a minute or two after to talk about what's going on in Charlottesville right now. As you all know, Charlottesville is facing a very, very difficult situation. The news just broke recently, just in the last, hour or so, that somebody plowed into a crowd with their vehicle, and at least 8 people have been injured, maybe more by now. One person has been arrested. It's a very tragic situation. I'm deeply disturbed by it because, of course, I'm a Virginian, and I love the Commonwealth of Virginia. Virginia gave us our Constitution, gave us our Bill of Rights. Virginians really, in the person, of course, primarily George Washington, really led the way to the Revolutionary War and gave us a victory over Great Britain that allowed our country to be free. Virginian Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. I really do consider Virginia to be a foundational a place for the very existence of this country because of what so many founding fathers contributed to making Virginia central to the liberty and freedom that we now enjoy. But what's going on in Charlottesville right now is nothing to celebrate. It's sad. So let me just say right off the bat, I condemn both sides in this issue. I condemn this quote unquote white right group, whatever that is. David Duke is in the middle of them and others. These people really are racists. They really are bad news. So I just soundly and categorically and unequivocally condemn them. I don't consider them to be part of the quote unquote right or part of the conservative movement in any way. They are outliers. They're fringe people. Frankly, they're dangerous people. They're bad for our country. They're bad for Virginia. And I understand that many of them have come from the outside. But I also condemn the other side because, look, you've got 40 or 50 of these so-called white right people there. And if you just ignored them, what do you think would happen? I think nothing. I think they would, I don't know what they'd do with themselves. Maybe they'd be forced to act out in a bigger way just to try to get attention. But that's what this is all about. It's all about getting attention. And, you know, most Americans now in 2017 look at those folks and just kind of roll their eyes and go, oh, boy, again, you know, these bunch of crazies once again trying to stir up trouble again. But this is why I condemn both sides. I condemn the counter protesters as well, because both sides of this want us divided racially. They want to turn everything into a racial issue. They believe that somehow it really is. Our country really is black against white. We're not that at all. We are a nation founded on principle, not race. Principle, not race. Now, I know we have been predominantly a nation of descendants of Europe, but we've got people from all over the world in our country. And we know the demographics are changing. And if they continue to change in the direction in which they're changing, after a while, the majority of our citizens will not be people of European descent. But the principles remain. And that ought to be what we as American citizens focus on, the principles which made America great. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's the foundational principle, that we have a Constitution that is written to secure these rights, not to give them, but to secure the rights that are inherent in who we are as human beings. I mean, these are wonderful foundational principles. And as of September 17th, we will have lived under those principles. Our country will have existed under those principles in that written Constitution for 230 years. It is the longest running successful document governing any people in the history of the world. We have a 230-year-old Constitution of the United States. It has stood us in good stead. We have amended it. We have changed it, but the Constitution remains. That's what we all ought to be celebrating. So I just condemn both sides because as far as I'm concerned, both of them are more interested in racial division than they are in us becoming one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, here's the second thing that might surprise you. But, I really think the time has come to just let these Confederate flags and monuments, aside from from personal property, just let them be somewhere where anybody who wants to go see them can go see them. And anybody who doesn't want to see them doesn't have to see them. I think public property ought to be for those symbols that unify us, like the American flag. And now, look, I am from Virginia. I live in Virginia. My family is originally from Virginia, from Orange County. I've been all over this Commonwealth. I've run for office here. I've been to Charlottesville many, many, many times. I've seen those monuments. My family and I have never given them a second thought, to tell you the truth, because what do they have to do with us? If nobody bothers us, nobody's harassing us, we never really cared. But the reality is, those who want to exploit division, those who want to try to make something of it, are going to continually either go back to defend the Confederate monuments, or they're going to go back to oppose the Confederate monuments. And you got the whole country and perhaps the whole world now looking at Virginia like, ooh, wow, Virginia, those people are really divided racially, aren't they? They're really against each other. And folks, it really just ain't so. A lot of these people who are protesting in Charlottesville are from out of state. But because this issue continues to dog us and dog every state where the Confederate flag plays some role in public life, I think it's just time to say, look, you know what? We've got bigger things to do. We've got inner cities that are in turmoil. We've got young men dying, killing one another by the thousands every year. It's like a war zone in inner cities across this country. We've got an anemic economy that is just beginning to bounce back under the leadership of President Trump. Whatever else people may think of him, President Trump is doing a tremendous job having our economy, having jobs come back, and giving the American people some hope of an economic future. We've got a major opioid crisis in our country. We've got public schools that aren't educating our children, particularly in our poor neighborhoods. Folks, we've got North Korea breathing down our necks, threatening to launch a nuclear war against us. We've got so many problems to address. Do we really want to be fighting over Confederate flags and monuments? And the answer to me is no. But you see, I believe that as long as we put these things up in people's faces, it's going to happen. Now, mind you, my wife and I have been to the Confederate Museum in Richmond. We went in, we felt welcome, we looked around. We just think American history is interesting and fascinating, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we want to know it and understand it better. And so we're students of American history. But when you put this stuff out there with the kinds of division we've got already, to me, it's just a formula for trouble. And we have so many other things to focus on. Look, if you take every monument down, everywhere they exist, every Confederate monument down, everywhere as they exist, will it give one person a job? Will it make one child get a better education? Will it bring one family back together that's been ripped apart and is being headed up by a single parent mother who is maybe on welfare? Will it make the streets of our cities any safer for the gangs and the drugs that are now plaguing them? Will it do anything to make any American's life better? No, it won't. And if you leave them up, it won't either. I don't even want to argue about it. I really don't. I just want to get past that, because slavery ended 150 years ago. Jim Crow ended, 60 years ago. Why in the world do we really want to go back and keep rehashing the same old battle? But as long as this stuff is in people's faces, they're going to want to do it. So my view is, we got museums, we got parks that are historical sites. Let's put them there. Anybody who wants to go look at them can do that. Anybody who doesn't have to see it. And maybe we can move on to things that are really going to impact the lives of the American people. Now, I know in saying that, there'll be some conservatives and some Republicans who disagree with me. So let me just make something clear. I do not believe, as some do, that anybody who honors the Confederate flag or anybody who wants to honor Confederate heroes and soldiers is racist. Now, I know some are. That's obvious from the what's happening in Charlottesville right now. But I would say many aren't, probably most aren't. They have an affinity and a loyalty to their state, to their families, to their history, and they want to honor that. And I don't have a problem with that at all. In fact, I defend anybody's right to fly a Confederate flag on your pickup truck, on your property. To just put them anywhere you want. But I think on public property that is owned by all the people, in effect, we ought to stick to those things that unify us and bring us together, not those things that tend to divide us and rip us apart. I'm not a supporter of the Confederate flag, don't get me wrong, because it's not part of the affection for American history that appeals to me, okay? As an American of African descent, that is not a time that I look back on with any affection. The country was divided, and I know it was divided over a number of issues. It wasn't just slavery, but slavery was certain, in my view, the biggest part of it. I mean, it had to do with economics as well. I mean, it had to do with states' rights and different views of politics. You know, I think part of what happened was we were resolving the whole issue of how much power does the federal government have versus how much power the states have. So I think all of those things were playing a role. But slavery was the big, it was the big elephant in the room. Let's put it that way. Slavery was the big deal, and it's the thing that most comes to our minds when we think of the Civil War. And so obviously, it is not something that Americans of African descent are going to have any affection for. But I'm not intimidated by it. I'm not frightened by it. It doesn't really bother me. But I know that for many, it does. For many, it is bothersome to them. But here again, for me, it's really just a distraction. Now, let me add this. I am not saying, because I know there are people on the left who believe this, so we ought to remove anything that has to do with George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and James Madison because they own slaves. I mean, I just think that's preposterous. That's just ridiculous. You're not going to find any person in American history who was perfect, just like you and I are not, okay? But to deny the tremendous contribution to the notion of freedom and to the idea of each human being living out their God-given potential is also, I mean, it's preposterous to deny that our founding fathers played a major role in doing that. They illuminated the whole world with the idea of what it really means to be free. And so to say, well, we're going to get rid of them because they were racist white men. I mean, that's just crazy. That's just going too far. They don't represent, in my view, a divided America. They represent a united America. And we ought to continue to honor them because they are in part responsible for the great freedom and opportunity that we enjoy in this country. And look, the last thing I would say is this. You ever wonder why in the world, Bishop Jackson, are we having these racial confrontations and debates? Every white person is a white supremacist now, we're told. And America is a nation of white supremacy. And every white person enjoys white privilege, we're told. And now we need safe spaces from white people. And we want to exclude white people from campuses on certain days. So, I mean, why in the world, 150 years after slavery and 60 years after Jim Crow, is that happening? Because it almost seems like on some levels, we haven't made any progress. And I'll tell you what my explanation is of this. I believe that we are regressing in some ways because there are forces in our country that have rejected Almighty God. And I think it just boils down to that. Because, you know, and you try to get the left to understand this, and there are probably some conservatives who don't understand it either. But I think the left, because they have by and large just rejected God completely, they don't understand this, that you can disagree with people and still love them and still care about them and still want them to be blessed and want them to thrive and prosper and grow. You may hate their ideas, but you don't hate them. And you may be opposed to their policies, but you don't want their personal destruction. And unfortunately, the further and further we get as a nation from God, the more love goes out the window. Any sense of our common humanity goes out the window. And in fact, somebody was saying that these alt-right, not alt-right, but these, they call themselves the white right, I guess. They had crosses and Christian symbols. Those people are a bit more Christians than the last rats you saw in the sewer. Now, that's just a fact. Because you cannot be a Christian and hate anybody. You can't. Not if you're an authentic Christian, because God forbids it. He commands you to love. He commands you to forgive. And he says, if you don't forgive others, I won't forgive you. But I think the farther we get from that, the more people find reasons to hate one another. And instead of being able to say, you know, we've come a long way racially in this country, we're now looking at people not on the basis of the color of their skin, but as Dr. King said, based on the content of their character. Instead of being able to say that, we're regressing. And it's more and more and more and more and more and more about race, about something as superficial as the color of our skin. And that's all that is. It's very, very superficial. It says nothing about our character. It says nothing about our heart. It says nothing about our intellect. It says nothing about how we treat others. All it says is some of us have lighter skin, some of us have darker skin. And that's all it says. And it doesn't say anything more than that. I don't care what you say. You can say, oh, yeah, no, there are certain racial characteristics. Yeah, but there are a lot of exceptions, too. There are a lot of exceptions. And so when you point at a person and say, these characteristics must be what this person is about because that person's black or because that person's white, you may get your whole bubble burst. I mean, if I may say, all black people can't dance and don't have rhythm, and some white people can dance up a storm and have plenty of it. So you just can't point at a person and say, oh, I can categorize that person. I know what that person is about based on the color of his or her skin. Folks, I say that this stuff that is going on in Charlottesville is an object lesson for all of us. We need to look at it and realize more than anything else, we got to come back to God. You know, to me, the racial divide boils down to a simple principle. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Treat other people the way you want to be treated. And if these people were really Christians, they would know what they're doing is not that. Treat others the way you want to be treated. And that's the basis for reconciliation and forgiveness and healing and hope and looking at the future in a positive way. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is to come back to the God of the Bible, the Judeo-Christian values that birthed this nation, and come back to the principle of one nation under God, because only then will we be indivisible and can we have liberty and justice for all. So God bless you all. Be praying for our country, and let's pray that we'll all ultimately be able to get together under one flag, and that's the flag of the United States of America. God bless you all.